This is a very basic review of linear equations that I'm hoping will help you guys. So we're going to start off using slope, and slope is always referred to with the letter M, and that we can find the slope given 2 points on the line. And so each point, each coordinate point on a grid is always labeled the x value first, then the y value. So every one that's in parentheses like that is always x first, then y. And if we're given two pairs, we just label one of them as the one and the other one as the second ordered pair that we're given. So we use this equation, m is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Remember that slope is also referred to as rise over run, so how much the line is rising up and then how much it's moving over left and right. So you can always look at it that way if you're actually looking at a graph and trying to determine what the slope is. But we're going to work on given the 2 points, and we're going to use our formula. M is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And so we're going to go label all these points. So we're going to say this one is my y2, my y1, my x2, and my x1. So let's put that in this equation and then solve for it. So we're going to have m is equal to 2 minus, and that is this minus sign, and if it's minus y1, well, y1 is a negative 3. Well, remember, what does that do to that equation if we have a minus a negative 3? Remember that imaginary 1 is always right here, so we think of that becomes 2 plus 3. So then we're working on our x1, which is 1, minus our x2, which is negative 2, and it's going to do the same thing. So we have 2 plus 3 over 1 plus 2. 2 plus 3 is 5. 1 plus 2 is 3. So this line that passes through these 2 points has a slope of 5/3. Now, the standard form of a linear equation is always in that form ax plus by is equal to c. So, for example, if you had 2x plus 3y is equal to 10. So, your a is your 2, your b is 3, and c is 10. And that, when it's in this format, it's an easy way to find those x and y intercepts. And remember, when we talk about our x-intercept, we're talking about the point where it crosses that x-axis. And when we're talking about the axis, we're talking about our coordinate grid. That's the y-axis. Here's your x-axis. So if we're talking about that x-intercept, let me go ahead and draw. We're talking about the place where it crosses this x-axis. And think about all these points that are on your x and y axis, or if it's on your x-axis, any point along this x-axis is some x value, but your y value is 0 along here because we're not moving up and down any when we do that or plot that point. So this is my x-axis, and so wherever that is, that's going to be your x-intercept. And remember, that ordered pair is going to be whatever that x value is, 0. Then your y-intercept is going to be the point where it crosses, the line crosses this y-axis here. And anywhere along here, x is going to be 0. So that ordered pair is always going to look like 0, comma, whatever that y value is. because any point along here is x is 0 and then whatever that y value. So let's take this one for an example. First we're going to find the x-intercept. And remember, that is when we know when it crosses this x-axis, y is 0. So we set that y equal to 0 in the equation and solve for x. So let's see, we're going to have 4 times x plus 6 times, well, we're going to set that y as 0. So y is equal to 0 is equal to 12. Well, any number times 0 is going to be 0, so that just leaves us with, well, we can say 4x plus 0 is equal to 12, or just 4x is equal to 12. Then we're still trying to get that x by itself, so we divide by the 4 on both sides, and we have x is equal to 3. So we know it crosses our x-axis at 3. But remember that ordered pair is 3, 0, which would be right here, 3, 0. So that's my x-intercept. So then we have to go find the other intercept, which is going to be where it's going to cross the y-axis. So we're going to look for that y-intercept, and we know x is equal to 0 anywhere along that x-axis. So we're going to go solve this equation, putting 0 in for the x and then solving for the y. So we have 4 times 0, because we're putting that in for our x, plus 6y is equal to 12. Well, and again, anything times 0 is just 0, so 0 plus 6y is equal to 12, or we can just say 6y is equal to 12. Then we have to divide by that 6 on both sides, and we get y is equal to 2. So now remember, this is not the x is 3, the y is 2. No, that is two totally different ordered pairs. So the ordered pair that represents our y-intercept is at 0, 2. And remember, it's got to be where it crosses this y-axis here. Well, it crosses the y-axis at 2, so we're going to put a dot right there. So these are two totally different ordered pairs to create this line. And we know it crosses through these 2 points, and so there is the line to that equation by showing the intercept. So let me go ahead and label this the y-intercept, and that is at 0, 2. Now, the most famous way that we're going to always write our linear equations is in the slope-intercept form, and that is that y equals mx plus b. And so on this, your b represents your y-intercept, and since we just talked about that, we should know that that's where it crosses the y-axis, where that line crosses the y-axis. And then m is always going to represent your slope, so that slope of the line. So in this form, we have the slope, and then we also know a point where it crosses, so that's why it gets its name, slope-intercept form. And the way we're going to do that is to graph on a coordinate grid, and this example here is our n y equals mx plus b format. So let's just look at that a little bit. So if we're looking at the equation y is equal to mx plus b, in our example here y is equal to negative 2x plus 5, the b or y-intercept is 5, this 5. And remember, that ordered pair for a y-intercept means x is 0, y is 5. So that's that ordered pair. Then we have a slope on this equation that's equal to -2. And remember, any whole number is always over 1, so if you need to think of it that way, so that means we're going to rise -2, we're going to run over 1, so rise over run. Okay, so now that we've identified those, let's go graph this equation on a coordinate grid. And the first thing you always want to start with when it's in y equals mx plus b format is start with that y-intercept. So we're going to start with this ordered pair at 0, 5. So we're going to go up the coordinate grid 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the y-axis. 5. So that's my y-intercept, and that ordered pair is at 0, 5. Now we're going to do the slope, and the slope is, we always graph it from that y-intercept. We're going to rise down 2, so 1, 2, then we're going to run over 1. And you can just keep doing that. The slope of that line is going to stay the same no matter how long that line is, so we can keep going down to an over 1. And there is, you notice it's going to be in a straight line, so there is the line that represents that equation y is equal to -2x plus 5. So do your y-intercept first, then follow the slope. Okay, well, what if it's not in y equals mx plus b format? Well, we're just going to put it in y equals mx plus b format if we're going to graph it that way. So let me go ahead and draw this on here real quick. So in this form, we've got 2x minus 4y is equal to 8. Well, we want to solve it for y equals mx plus b. So we need to move this x over first. And remember, we're going to do that by saying we're going to subtract the whole 2x and move him to the other side of the equation. Now, he cannot be joined with that 8 because they are not like terms. So we're left with that -4y is equal to -2x plus 8. Because remember, we're looking for this format, y equals mx plus b. So I want that x value listed first, that constant listed last. Well, I still have not solved for y yet. I still have this -4 over here, and I want the y all by itself. So now, since they're standing together, the -4 and the y, that means -4 times y. So the opposite of that is to divide by -4. And if we divide, we can divide every term by -4. So -4 divided by -4 is 1, and that just leaves us with our 1y. Now -2 divided by -4 makes negative divided by negative is a positive, and 2 divided by 4 is 1/2, or 2 over 4, which can be reduced. So 1/2 x, and then we have 8 divided by -4, which is -2. Okay, where is the y-intercept based off of this equation? So now this thing is in y equals mx plus b format, so there's the equation of the line, but now we're going to go graph it. My y-intercept is at -2. So remember that ordered pair, 0, -2. Well, where are we going to graph that on the y-intercept? Well, here's my y-axis right here. So we're going to go to -2 and put a point on the line. So next we're going to go graph the slope. Well, what's the slope of this line? The slope is 1/2, or this m value, whatever that is, which means we're going to rise 1, run over 2. So rise over run. All right, so from that y-intercept, we're going to rise up 1 unit and then run over 2 units because that's all positive. So it's going to go that way. Okay, so now we're going to draw our straight line. And again, you could keep doing that and make more points if you want to, so that you get them all right. And there is the graph for the equation 2x minus 4y is equal to 8, or in slope-intercept form, y is equal to 1/2 x minus 2. All right, let's try to do one more, and then we'll move on. You can try to be solving that equation for y. All right, so this equation we have 2y is equal to negative 2x plus 6. So 2y is equal to negative 2x plus 6. Well, it's pretty close to y equals mx plus b format, but we have this 2 out next to the y, and we need to, get rid of him, which means we're going to divide every term by that 2 so that we end up with just 1y over here. So we have 1y is equal to, well, negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1x, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now you do not have to list that. You can list that negative 1 is just y is equal to negative x plus 3, as long as you can remember that there is a imaginary 1 inside of, or in front of that x. Okay, so on this one, our y-intercept, and think that's that y equals mx plus b format. B is always our y-intercept, so that y-intercept is at 3. So we're going to come over to our graph and say I'm going to put a dot, a point right there at 3. Then we're going to look and see what's the slope of this line. Well, my slope is negative 1. Well, how are we going to graph that? Well, remember, any whole number is always over 1. We just don't write it that way. So that means we're going to rise negative 1 and run over 1. So down 1, over 1. Down 1, over 1. Down 1, over 1. So we can just keep doing that, get that graph of that line, know that it's nice and straight, and graph that equation. All right, so last thing we're going to talk about is that point-slope formula of a linear equation. And just like our slope-intercept formula, this is point-slope. So we know a point on the line, which means some ordered pair, we know lies on our line. And then we also know that slope of the line, which is often represented as that m. And you may have to use a few more steps, and so these are things that you need to go over in your head when you're studying for a test. So m is that slope, and the only way to solve for m, you know your formula for that, that y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So you're always going to keep that slope formula in mind, because that's the only thing you can solve for when you're given 2 points on the line. So this one says write the equation of a line that passes through these 2 points. Well, we can't go straight to that point slope formula because we don't know what the slope is yet, and because we need to know 1 point and the slope on the line. So let's color code these. This will be my x1. This will be my y1. Then my x2 and my y2. And I just labeled them. Remember, every ordered pair is in the form xy. So we're going to use that slope formula. M is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's go fill that in using the numbers that we were given. So y2 is 9 minus y1, which is a negative 3. Well, we can't drop that negative sign. So remember, 9 minus negative 3 really means 9 plus 3, because that negative 1 on the outside of those parentheses. x2, which is 3, minus x1, which is a negative 1. Well, let's simplify that. 9 minus negative 3 really means 9 plus 3, so that gives us 12. And 3 minus a negative 1 means 3 plus 1, which is 4. Well, we need to reduce that. 12 divided by 4 is 3. Okay, so now we know the slope is 3. So the slope of this line is 3. Well, in order to use our point slope formula, we need to know a point on that line. Well, we know all these points. We know 2 different points on the line, and we only want to use one of them. And just for convenience sake, I always choose the easiest one, which is probably the one that doesn't have negative numbers in it. So I'm just going to use that point, and we're going to say the point on that line is 3, 9. And I'm actually going to, let me color code those so you'll know where they're coming from. 3, and I'll keep them. 9. So using this information now, we're going to say, remember our slope here is the m, and our point on the line, we're going to say this 3 is our x1 now, and the 9 is our y1. And we have that formula, y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. That's our point slope formula that we're going to use. And we're going to put in our y1 right here. Our slope gets put in for that m, and our x1 value gets put in for this x1, down here. Okay, we're ready to go fill this out. So y minus y1, which is 9, is equal to m, which is the slope that we just figured or calculated what our slope was, times x minus x1, and our x1 is 3. Okay, so now we're ready to go solve this equation. This is actually the point slope form of the line, but normally it's going to tell you to go ahead and go solve it for the slope intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So the first thing you're going to do is distribute this 3 to both terms inside those parentheses. You're going to get y minus 9 is equal to 3 times x, it's 3x, and 3 times the negative 3 is negative 9. Then all you have to do is move this term over, and that gives you y is equal to 3x, and we have a negative 9 plus 9, which is plus 0. So if we were going to go graph that, you wouldn't have to, the equation, you could also just write it like this. If you don't want to write that 0, that's fine. But remember, this means that y-intercept then is at 0, and we have a slope of 3. So if we were going to go graph that real quick, where is the y-intercept at 0? Well, 0 is always just right there. That's where we start, 0, 0. Then we have a slope of 3, which means you would rise up 3, run over 1. Remember, that's always over that imaginary 1. And so there would be the equation and the graph of that line. So either one of these is really acceptable for me. Probably the most acceptable one in math terms would be to not put that 0 on there, but either one works. So I hope this helps explain linear equations just a little bit better for you guys.